Good evening and welcome to the second of two final Inside Government programs tonight from Cayuga Community College for the fall 2021 semester. These are broadcast on Spectrum, Verizon Fios, the Auburn Media Access, better known as ARMA, as well as this college's radio station, Win 89.1. I'm your host, Guy Cosentino. We are delighted to have as our final guest of the fall 21 semester here, Senator John Mannion, who was with us, I think, in February. Came into the studio with your wife, all COVID up, and everybody had masks at that point. Still do on our table. We walk around with them, but he represents the 50th Senate District, which has much of the east side of the city of Auburn and the eastern Cayuga County, as well as parts east into Onondaga County. He is in Auburn today. He did the Veterans event at Veterans Park this morning, and he's been gracious enough to come in to talk to us about things that we didn't cover necessarily back in February. We have a new governor that he has been on the podium with several times. The last time that I remember was here in Auburn, as well as the former governor's back in the news for not so good reasons. Right. And we want to look at what's coming up in the next legislative session. So what your plans are next year. Welcome back.
Thank you, Guy, for having me on. It's always a pleasure. I appreciate the good work that's done here, and of course, it's important to highlight legislative issues, and that's what happens here. So I'm happy to be on again.
Well, terrific. Before getting into the nitty-gritty of policy, what have you been doing today? So you were at Veterans Park today?
Yes, I was at Veterans Park. It was a great ceremony, a great way to honor our veterans, as we should every day. There were several representatives there, several representatives who are elected officials who are former veterans, and I think that's representative of sort of the great military that we have, that people continue that public service. It included a few folks, including Councilor Giantino, but as Mayor Quill and others. Congressman Katko was there, Senator Helming was there, I was there, and another former military, Assemblyman Lamondes, was there. So it was a great event, and the weather held out. And
I heard that, I didn't schedule well. We were talking about this earlier. We had a board meeting. Our foundation met roughly at the same time. But I talked to somebody this morning. There were about 200 people there. Great turnout.
It was a great turnout, and many of the speakers acknowledged that there was many families there. And I just think that's important, that there's families with their children, to show, let's remember how we got here, and let's remember the freedoms that we have and the wonderful place that we live. And that didn't come without a price, and we should pay respect to those who have served. And I think that was highlighted by many and greatly appreciated by the veterans.
So I want to talk about a couple of things that have some local impact, but one of those is the last time I think you and I were at maybe not, because you were at Public Safety 2 weeks ago, but one of the last times I saw you at a podium was with Kathy Hochul.
Yeah.
She was the lieutenant governor then. About 2 weeks later, she was announced that she would be the new governor.
Right.
So she has been in office roughly 60 days. How's she doing so far?
I think she's doing well. I think she has been a public servant for a long time. She's held multiple positions. She is a Syracuse University graduate and a native of Buffalo. She understands the issues that upstate faces. She knows our history. She knows
first governor in almost a century.
That's right. And again, she's broken through many ceilings in that regard. But she is truly a listener. She speaks about making sure that she collaborates, and my experience with her in her short term has been just that she's true to her word. I think we've seen that she's willing to make bold decisions and stand by them, but she listens as well, and I'm happy to work with her. And I certainly have heard that it seems like it is a new era, that we do, that there's more of a back and forth, and there's more accessibility in a way, and that's something that the people want.
That was not necessarily something that Governor Cuomo was known for.
I was fairly new to this. I'm commenting on some of the things I've heard from. Hey, things are different. Like we can get through.
So has your conference met with her?
We have not formally met. No,
because we should say this: if we're taping since she became governor, I don't think the legislature has gone back even for a special day.
We did go back for a special day, yes, and we did go back for a special day.
Is that on housing?
It was. Okay. That's right. So,
but as a conference, there's not necessarily been conference meetings as a group where you're all in session?
Not. The chamber's representatives, our senior staff, and my staff and other staff, they're in communication because we have legislation that was passed that we're hoping is signed into law. So, and there's other issues, of course, in the state. So there are communications, but myself and the governor, we have directly communicated since she has taken over, and we have discussed certain issues that are important to me. But
so, without getting into the privacy of the conversation, what are those issues that are important to you?
Right. Well, there's a few things that are outstanding. One of them is a very important one to me. It has to do with parity of special schools or special act schools. So there are schools that are residential schools for people of school age that have severe needs, and then there's also schools that extend beyond the typical K-12 years, with be they preschool or beyond. So I'm proud to have fought for and helped secure record funding for school districts to make sure that they can provide RUS programs for kids in an enriched learning environment. These schools are unique in that when school districts receive this funding, these other schools, some of them are part of school districts, some of them kind of stand alone, don't fall under that category. So they're really at I'm going to say the whim, but we know it's more than that, of the Board of Regents of the SUNY system, or state ed, excuse me, to then go, okay, here is your funding. And the reason that that's challenging is because these schools have a harder time planning. It's hard enough to budget. So that's something that unanimously passed both chambers of the legislature.
Signature.
We're waiting for her signature on it. We're hopeful that she signs it. It, of course, we're the taxpayers of New York State want to make sure their money is spent prudently. I believe that the governor wants that as well. So this is a parity bill which ties the amount of funding that goes to school districts also to those schools, so that they are not shortened.
We all learn in our civics class, which are not done anymore, but that's a different issue, that if you're in Washington, there's only so many days for a pocket veto and all that.
Yes.
We obviously had a transition here.
Right.
The governor, did the clock stop on some of that stuff?
So a little bit of what's an interesting word that's used in Albany is that bills will be delivered to the governor. Okay. But those bills actually have to be, the way that they're delivered is the governor asks for them. So once the governor asks for a bill to be delivered, there's then 10 days for the governor to either sign or veto.
So you're not relying on Postmaster DeJoy to deliver.
It's a different kind of delivery, I think we're talking about, Guy.
So I do want to ask you two other questions on the governor, and just one is, you've mentioned upstate a couple of times. Do you think that her budget will be, we'll get into budget priorities in a few minutes, but do you think her budget will be more focused on a lot of needs upstate because she is from upstate?
I think I would have to say, I can't answer specifically for her, but I would say that has to be the case. I think she's from here. She understands the area. She understands the challenges that we face up here as it relates to our history and sort of shifting away from a manufacturing base. I think Central New York has some
and
great...
she's a great proponent, great in the sense of large proponent of tourism.
She is. So that just came out. I also think she addresses issues that it's just, we hear this all the time, that there are issues that are unique to our area that are different from places downstate and New York City specifically, things related to childcare. She's a huge proponent of childcare, and if we are going to make sure that the upstate economy is robust, childcare is a piece of that, and there's some things that I think don't quite make sense as it relates to subsidies for families, and I think she understands that, is really taking a look at it, and is one of the things that she wants to champion.
Do you think she'll get a honeymoon? Because she comes to office in a different way. So normally somebody's sworn in on January 1st, and you always think honeymoon, January, February.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she's going to have 120 days in.
Right.
Do you think she gets a honeymoon?
If I'm using your word honeymoon, and in our engagement with her office, I think the honeymoon is over, let's say. Okay. I think people expect things of the governor of New York, and myself being in this position, she took a look at many of the commissioners that were out there and had to make some tough decisions, and she made those. And of course, with any of those types of decisions, there's going to be a transition period. I think our office saw and acknowledged that sometimes that transition might take a little bit of time. But our engagement with different offices under her purview,
government still's got to run.
It's got to run, and it is, honestly, Guy. When we need an answer to a question, we're getting that answer just like we would have in previous times.
Are you supporting her for re-election?
So I'm, of course, supportive of her. I support her many of the things that she, is championing, I would say. And of course, I think it's great that we have an upstate governor. I think it's great that she understands our area, So she knows that she has my support in working together. And I have a race in 2022. I'm really focused on that.
We might get to that in a few minutes, but are you surprised that the Attorney General, Tish James, got into this?
So I also have a great relationship with the Attorney General, and I think she's done a great job when it comes to holding different organizations or individuals accountable, including like the pharmaceutical industry. We've seen what has happened in our area and across the state as a result of that crisis, which it really is. So am I surprised? I think she's a very strong candidate. I think she certainly has hit the ground running in her job as Attorney General. I think she's done a great job as Attorney General.
But you'd rather see her run for re-election as Attorney General?
Well, if she's running as governor, she's running as governor, and we will have a new Attorney General because the elections happen at the same time.
How do you think she, though, handled the Cuomo investigation?
Well, let's remember, Governor Cuomo asked her, right? He sort of said, we want the Attorney General to investigate this. So she, I believe, did a very thorough job of that investigation and released a report. That's her job to do. The taxpayers of New York State.
So you don't find any fault with the process she went through? You thought it was a good process. And I know this week we've seen some transcripts being released.
Yeah, I would say, from somebody who does not have her job, by all accounts, her office did the job that they needed to do.
So there is in Eastern New York, there's a pending criminal process.
Yes.
It's a little hazy over the last 10 days of exactly who's doing what and how. But do you think that process is going well or how it should be going?
Yeah.
And that's for the prosecution of the governor.
Right. I have followed that to a degree. I agree with you that there's a little bit of haziness and some of the statements that came out either by the governor's attorneys or others allude to the fact that maybe every protocol or every procedure wasn't followed correctly. So, I can't really speak to that because I'm not on the inside of that.
So the Senate did not have a role prior to the governor. You were waiting for a Assembly Judiciary report.
Right.
It's been reported. So the Senate would vote on impeachment, not on the report until they got a report. Correct on that?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Right,
so
yes.
One of the issues that has come up in the last 48 hours is there is likely going to be a review by the Assembly Judiciary of their report. Originally, Carl Hastie, the Speaker, said the investigation was done.
Right.
There was a slight backlash from members of both parties,
right,
saying you can't do that. Do you think these findings will become public?
That's a great question. I hope that they are. I will say that. There has been a level of criticism that investigation has taken as long as it has. But I think if we go back in time, we see that investigation was necessary. And again, if we're in an era of true transparency, and this is not from the governor's office, this would be from the Assembly, I'm hopeful that happens.
Before we get to 2021, I'd like to stay with 2022.
Okay.
What do you think are going to be the big issues? Not for your race.
Yeah.
What do you think the big races for the governor? And look in your political crystal ball.
Sure.
What a year from now are voters going to be looking at?
Well, I think for me, in the time that I have been at people's doors and having great conversations with them, and also meeting with civic leaders or leaders of industry. In Central New York, we have tremendous natural resources. We have tremendous educational institutions. We have tremendous systems. We want to make sure that any company that wants to do business in upstate New York has the ability to do that, specifically Central New York, and that we're drawing more businesses here because this is a great place to live. Yeah.
So are we doing well enough? Could we do better? What's your...
I think we can always do better. You know, I was just out at Nucor Steel not too long ago, right? And it's a fascinating, first of all, to be there. And the people that do there do a tremendous job. And they have taken a very environmentally proactive approach to what they do. So much that other steel manufacturers in the state, out of the state, and around the world look to them. So they've addressed and been proactive with the challenges of trying to make sure that we do things in an environmentally conscious way. So I look at that and I say, you know, here's a company that has taken upon themselves to do what they do and do it very well and provide a lot of great jobs. And they serve as sort of a template of how to get things done. So it can be done in New York State. We can always do better. And I want to make sure that organizations like that have done the work ahead of time, there might be different manufacturers that are looking for incentives to come to New York. Well, they've done it without that incentive. You know, let's not forget folks like that.
So let's time travel back to April.
Sure.
Did you support all the budget bills?
I did not.
You did not. So
No.
What did you support? What did you like?
Yes.
What were the highlights and what were the lowlights?
Sure. So I'll tell you, you know, again, let's go back to the word support. All right, because support means vote. There was elements of those budget bills, 10 budget bills, where I was supportive of many things in all of them, and then also probably critical of some things in them. Every budget bill is not necessarily going to have exactly everything that you want. But there were some bills that I did vote no on, and I voted no on because I felt like that in some areas of that bill, it just did not potentially best serve the taxpayers and the constituents of the 50th Senate.
Can you give us an example of something?
Now, listen, I'm supportive of the dollars that came to the localities, but I was actually a no vote on aid to localities, and I was a no vote on the apportionment, the revenue piece. And it did have to do with where some of those dollars went. So, you know, listen, for those of us that live in upstate New York, we have many rural areas. Agriculture is a very important part of it. I've gone to those farms and met with leaders of these farms that know the work that is necessary from individuals that come into this country to do the work. And they have a process for checking that, you know, the documentation of those individuals, of course. But part of one of those bills did send a significant amount of money to what's called the Excluded Workers Fund. And my issue is not that we don't support people that come and work in this country, or even people that may not be documented that are in this country, because the areas, our systems, our organizations have to provide services for those folks. But you know, the nature of it would be that they would have to document a loss of income, and as a result of that, I feel like some of those dollars that would go there probably could have been spent in other areas. I will speak to the fact that I am disabilities chair, you know, and the disabilities world, if I can call it that, really needs to be robustly funded. And unfortunately, it's been underfunded for a long period of time.
Is it easier? The Democrats have a super majority, what I would consider a super majority.
Mm-hmm.
If it was tighter, would you have gotten pressure? We obviously know there are 13 House Republicans who are getting their heads beat in right now in Washington. Is it easier when you have a larger majority that your majority leader, Andrea Stewart-Cousins, isn't keeping your feet to the fire on every single bill?
So she's a great leader, and she understands the diversity of the state. And by the diversity, I don't just mean, you know, ethnic or religious or racial diversity. I just mean regional, the interests of the region. So she and I have a great conversation. We just have a great relationship, and just had a conversation. I think it was 2 nights ago. Whereas we had conversations. There's a lot going on at the budget time, but I felt like I could get my voice in there. I felt like I was effective in making sure that some things were secured in the budget. Again, not everything I wanted was in there, but a lot of things were. And you know, when you have that big of a majority, as you referenced, it's important to be in the majority. It's important to have a voice in the room, and I could see that in the budget process, and I feel like we had a lot of victories for Central New York and also in education and the disabilities world.
So you're maybe termed a former educator. I don't think you were ever a former educator as you taught. This is an election year. Do you and redistricting?
Mm-hmm.
So we'll get into that in a moment.
Sure.
But do you think there will be more money for school districts this coming year because it is redistricting and because the normal process in an election year is always above the governor's estimates?
Yeah. So I will say this: I'm optimistic that there is going to be continued appropriate funding for education because I believe the Senate and the Assembly have a commitment to that and have actually made a commitment to it.
So this is on the issue of foundation aid and
Yes,
correcting that?
It is.
So there's and I don't think I'm saying this right, but is it the Maisto case which was decided, the appeals court?
It was litigated. It was litigated that New York State is not fully funding public education, and therefore our House made a commitment to fully fund that 100%.
But those are 8 school districts. I'm talking about all the rest of them. So say somebody like Auburn who was not part of that case, which is part of your district, do you see them benefiting from that court case as well?
I do, but I'm going to break this out into a couple different ways. Number one, we're committed to using the formula. We're committed to fully funding that formula in those school districts. That's one.
Will it be done next year?
Will it? No, it won't be. It's over a 2-year span.
Okay.
So it's to 80% and 100%. But back to Auburn, right? Because I have been to multiple schools in Auburn since I've taken office, before I took office. Auburn is at the wrong end of that funding formula, and we need to fix the formula, either break it and redo it or fix it. And I'm committed to that. It's one of, if I can talk about my 5 priorities, but I have 5 priorities.
Where are you? No, that is a question. Go ahead.
So, but let me go back to foundation, because this is important for Auburn. It really is. So,
and I know you talked about it at the public safety building there. Sure. I've heard you at other events. So please.
We need to properly fund the Auburn Enlarged School District and others like it, because they're at the wrong end of that formula. They unfairly might receive, $10,000 less per pupil from the state. It's because it's an antiquated formula that's wrong. We are working on legislation, and it may be a big lift, but to try to remediate some of the things in the short term before we fix that formula.
And I only ask this because I know the campaign for fiscal equity 15 years ago, that's not fully funded. That's why I'm asking, is it the next year, is it next 2 years, or do you think it may even take longer?
I'm hopeful and optimistic that we can do it in 2 years.
I mentioned there is a budget next year, a process in a couple weeks. It is an election year. It's redistricting. Do you think that there will be an uptick in spending just because it is both?
I believe that we have to fund the programs in New York State that are the supports necessary to make sure the roads are paved and the water's flowing and the kids are in school and all of those things. So I really can't speculate as to if that has anything to do with it. I know this. I'm fighting for the 50th district and for Central New York, and I can't focus on whether it's an election year or not. For me, it's making sure that we get back our fair share.
So, and I don't, this is not to be critical of her, but obviously Governor Cuomo is a different person than Kathy Hochul, stature-wise, in the sense of it seems they govern so far, as we can see in 60 days.
Right.
One of the things the governor took away, and previous governors worked at chipping away, with these issues of the member items, or some people will call them pork barrel spending.
Right, yeah.
Where individual legislators can then dole out that money. That didn't mean the governor didn't dole out. He just got credit for it.
Sure.
Do you think that member items are something that are likely to come back in the coming years? It's based on seniority, based on your majority-minority status. Do you think that's something that will be coming back?
I really can't speculate that. I'm not sure. I will say that, the people of New York State expect an open and transparent and fair process when it comes to the New York State budget. Yeah.
Concerns that it wasn't very transparent.
That's right.
There were members who were literally giving money to family members.
Well, I can't
mainly in the downstate
Yeah,
area.
I can't speak to that, but
Well, they ended up in criminal prosecutions.
right, absolutely. So you can where I land is this. I'm trying to help the communities and the organizations and the people of Central New York, and it's that type of governing that people don't want. They're frustrated with. They want transparency, and I think with the new governor and also strong leadership like Majority Leader Stuart Cousins, certainly carries. I think we're moving in a better place, and I'm hopeful. It's part of the reason I ran.
With the last 3 or 4 minutes that we have, you obviously talked about foundation aid, but you also just mentioned that you had 5 priorities. What are they?
So I did mention public education. To fully fund public education, it's not just to fully fund it, because we want to make sure that there is we're making sure that we're meeting the needs of our kids, not just from a civic standpoint or a graduation standpoint, but in a number of other ways related to their future employment and just their wellness. It's been a challenging few years. So public education is certainly a priority. Another is the environment. New York State wants to be a leader in environmental actions. We have algal blooms in our lakes. We did have, if I can call it this, a good year. But I made sure that it was a priority for me. We secured funding and helped support some programs in some of our Finger Lakes here. As far as ethics goes, that's another one. Ethics. Sorry about that. Ethics is important in New York State. I think we would all agree. I think we saw a lot of that. I think there's more to be told out there. So when we talk about the ethics process in JCOPE, I do believe that there's many legislators that have stated their frustrations with it for a long period of time, and I do think we're going to see action in there, and I'm proud to be supportive of that and be a part of it. So are we almost out of time?
We are,
and
that's fine. I do want to get to redistricting because that's going to be a big issue for here.
Sure.
So there's an independent panel that has come out with their map. The Democratic majority has come out with their map. Where are you in these maps?
Right. Where am I physically?
Yes, physically.
I think I'm out of my district actually right
you are
now,
right
Guy.
now.
If we're gonna,
so my question,
but it's not a joking. It's not a laughing matter.
So
right,
I guess the question is, what would your new district? Forget the independent panel.
Okay.
What the Democratic majority, if they go with their proposal, what will you represent?
Right. So the Independent Redistricting Commission is made up of 10 members, and the maps that came out, the assumption would be, or the hope would be, I think the intent would be that one map came out from that 10-person independent redistricting panel. There's 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, and then 2 who are unaffiliated. Those 2 honestly seem to align with either party. So what happened was the maps that came out were 2 maps, not one map. So there's a Democratic map, if I may call it that, which was called letters, and the Republican map, which was called names. And in those, those maps came out. They're different versions of it. They're kind of similar in a lot of ways. We are now in the public input time, where there are public meetings regarding them. There'll be more input. I've been told that those maps will change.
But there is a possibility that you won't represent, if you were reelected in 2022, representing Cayuga County at all.
So it's always possible. I will say this, that the towns that I represent are Ira, Cato, Brutus, Senate, and about 2/3 of the city of Auburn. I love the areas that I represent. I've established, I think, over the course of this 1 year, good relationships with many of those areas. I want to represent those areas. I will see where we land with independent redistricting, but it's also always a possibility. And like we've seen around the country, where maps are already being approved by legislatures, right now we don't know. But I'm hopeful.
When do you think we'll know? Petitions go out in February.
They do. So what I believe is there will be a map. State law says there has to be a map presented to the legislature from the commission in January. That will be up for a vote from us, and then there will be, if that map is rejected, there will be another one. There was just a proposition on the ballot that went down that was there to try to set a timeline so that we could have maps in place so people knew where they were running. I'm still confident that that's going to happen, but it will be a narrow timeline, and I don't think you're not going to see a map voted on until January.
But your assumption is that, and I'm not asking for a formal
Yeah.
announcement unless you want to make it. You're more than welcome. But you, I am assuming, are running for re-election.
I'm proud and enjoy serving the 50th Senate District, and I am by all indications, I'm back at it again, God willing.
And I didn't hear a car squeal in the parking lot where your wife's right now, so she might be on board.
Well, we can end, if we're getting to the end here, by saying I'm very fortunate to have a supportive family, including a supportive wife who we were both born and raised here. We love Central New York and the surrounding areas. We love Auburn. We spend a lot of time here. We've made a lot of friends here that we didn't already have. And, my kids are a little bit older and they're supportive. And I feel like I've built a network of friends and connections over the course of time, being outside of the political world, not being a part of it. And I do think that is helpful to me. I think it's helpful in keeping me true to myself and keeping me committed to the cause that I ran on.
Well, Senator, we appreciate your time. Thank you for coming back in the studio. We hope that in February, when we find a date that the legislature is not in session, you can come back and join us and give us an Albany update.
Absolutely. Well, I always appreciate to be on, Guy. Thanks for having me.
And our guest has been Senator John Mannion. We appreciate him coming to the college to give us an update. As this is our last day of programming, I do want to give out a couple of thank yous. First of all, to our students who make this all work. This is part of their education. They get credit for it. This is part of how they learn their future trades and careers, and we appreciate all of their work. We do a lot of forums. We do a lot of shows here. We would not do these without the staff here at the college. Professor Steve Keeler, Doug Brill, Mike Morano, and Jeff Sesniak make it all work, and we really appreciate everything. I personally appreciate everything they do. We do want to let you know that you can give us your ideas for guests for Inside Government or be on the front page for this coming semester. We hope to be back with you in February. You can send us an email at cozguitho@aol.com and let us know what you're thinking and who you'd like to hear from. I'm Guy Cosentino for Cayuga Community College. I want to thank you for watching. Hope you have a good night. Have a great tomorrow. Be safe and be well. Enjoy the holidays. Wear a mask and get vaccinated if you haven't.